My name is Dr. Christopher McKinley. I'm an assistant professor here at Montclair State University. I guess my specialization is health communication, so I teach and do research involving that particular area. That's I've been doing for the last 5 years.
My name is Carissa Ruff. I am the Program Assistant of Health Promotion and Campus Recreation. And so I work in the drop-in center where we have a lot of different programs that we do. We have a lot of outreach, and we have students that come in for things like condoms, stress reduction supplies, any sort of health or preventative materials.
Health communication is the practice of communicating general health information to the public in order to make better decisions and to keep the public informed. A few areas of importance concerning health communication are to increase audience knowledge and awareness of a health issue, influence behaviors and attitudes towards a health issue, demonstrate healthy practices, demonstrate the benefits of behavior changes to public health outcomes, advocate a position on a health issue or policy, and increase demand or support of health services.
I was always interested in media, but I wasn't really sure how that was going to shape out. Originally, I was kind of interested in advertising. Anyway, so I went on for my PhD, and I kind of accidentally discovered that you could look at the impact of media on health from a very scholarly perspective. Actually study the influence that media has on people's health. You hear so much about violence, or you would hear about it in the context of politics, or you hear about news media being influenced in a very large or macro way by like media ownership or media law. But this was a very specific topic that seemed to have some real social importance. Not that those others don't, but this one really seemed to. I seemed to really gravitate toward that. I worked on a grant during that time in which we looked at food advertisements to children and kind of examined all the different food ads that are on television, marketed to kids. That was one thing I did. My dissertation actually looked at how entertainment television portrays binge drinking and the consequences related to it, and how it influences viewers' beliefs, attitudes, and maybe even behaviors. I was asked to kind of build a concentration in health, which was a really kind of interesting and exciting thing to think about, building all these different courses around this topic, because it's a really broad topic. I mean, media is one aspect of it, but there's a whole interpersonal aspect of it, there's an organizational aspect of it, there's a cultural element to health, which all ties to communication. And so it's really exciting to see how it could really expand from my very narrow focus. A lot of the work I do now is more looking at how people use media to navigate, to find relevant health information for their own personal health concerns, whether it's physical or mental health. I think you have to look at it from different perspectives. I mean, from a communication competence, we think about as being in a very technical way, as being effective and appropriate in your communication strategy or approach, right? It's one thing to be effective and get your point across. It's another thing to do it in an inappropriate manner, which is really problematic. I think that's from a kind of like, so from the perspective of just being able to present yourself effectively to others, I think that's important when you're a teacher, when you're an instructor. As a professor, it's important to be able to present the material in a clear way, an appropriate way, to not patronize your students or present anything in a way that is that would be viewed as insulting to the student. Challenging your student at the same time, challenging your students effectively, as well as I think. We study communication, so we understand how others should communicate effectively. A lot of us in this area of communication are naturally decent communicators because it's a very social profession. It's a social, whether you look at it as a humanistic field or a social scientific field, it involves constant collaboration and interaction with others. Whereas maybe some other areas there's less social interaction involved in the profession. So
I started out as a theater major and in undergrad, and then I tacked on a health education minor and fell in love with it. So then I ended up doing 2 years off to make sure it's something I really wanted to do. I taught yoga and did massage therapy in the meantime, and did a lot of research on public health. And because my professors had suggested that public health would be something that would be really great for me. So I did a lot of research in it, and I ended up going to Emory University, where I majored in public health, got my master's degree in behavioral science and health education with a certificate in mental health, and I also spent a lot of time doing health communication. I think the main thing that's relevant in terms of health communication is I worked for the CDC last summer doing a fellowship for health communication, and I worked a lot with their online presence and the way that they translate their research to practice, and that was a very enlightening experience. I was able to talk to all of the researchers that had very had great insight to all these different things, but it was very jargony and really hard even for someone with a master's degree in this field to understand some of what they were saying. And some of the products that they would come out with were these big infographics with tons of charts and lines and numbers, and you're like, oh gosh, how can anyone read this ever? And you really want it to be kind of like a third grade reading level is ideal, third to fourth grade reading level is ideal, and then 8th grade is okay, we can handle 8th grade, but it was more PhD level stuff that we were sending out. So so trying to make that way more clear and concise and make it more friendly looking, because when you go onto the CDC webpage, you see all this information and all these risk ratios and odds ratios, and you're just I don't know what this is. And so making it very question answer format is even just trying to get it to that was really really useful, and also a big challenge because the scientists want to have a lot of information in there, and you want to have as few sentences as possible to explain really complex ideas. I think one of the big things that public health that we ended up having to face is things vaccines specifically. The anti-vaccine group is really loud, and so it's really challenging to talk to people in a way that isn't going to make them defensive. I think that we have a big issue with that, and a big, a kind of a gap in being able to translate that information well without sounding kind of preachy.
Well, one of the challenges with studying this issue is that you may be asking people sensitive questions, personal questions about their, about things that are, topics that they may not want to answer right away or be comfortable answering, as well as the fact that there are individuals or entities that don't want to allow you access to individuals to ask those questions. It's more challenging to do research in health in some ways than in other areas because of the institutional review restrictions, right?
I think risk communications should be a really big part of health communication, and that's kind of in the way that you speak to people, in the way, and it's kind of almost like marketing, because you have to reach people where they're at and start with what they already know, and it can seem or feel kind of manipulative while you're doing it, but the information's being manipulated anyway, so it's you're kind of manipulating it the right way, which is kind of there's a lot of ethics involved with it. So people are really receptive to the first thing that they hear. So if the first thing they hear about Ebola is that it's going to, kill them immediately and it'll probably go worldwide and it's going to be crazy and zombies, then they're really going to be stuck on that, and it's going to be hard for them to separate that from any information that they receive after that. So kind of being the first person tends to be a really useful tactic in terms of health communication.
I think also I would argue that there's kind of I think a lot of people are diminish the value that public health messaging plays in the decisions people make about their health, right? The persuasion aspect of it, or just the informative aspect of of public health messages, I think, get diminished in people's own vantage point about the importance of those type of getting that information out, which I think is really crucial, because we're flooded with so many commercial messages about health, right? Drug ads, you know, for certain products. Those are the dominant health messages that people receive now. So it's unfortunate.